Summer is here, which means we all want to look and feel our best. A GLP-1 may be right for you. Visit orderlymeds.com to learn more about which GLP-1 you could be eligible for. Getting started is fast, easy, and happens virtually through telemedicine from licensed professionals. Check it out for yourself. Go to orderlymeds.com/podcast. That's orderlymeds.com/podcast. Taking care of yourself feels great. Compounded medications are not FDA approved. Eligibility required and determined by a licensed provider. Individual results may vary. See website for details.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. Today is Tuesday, July 21st, 2026, and my God, there is so much news just exploding today. On this episode, you're going to hear from the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. You're going to hear from the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. You'll hear from Prime Minister Mark Carney, Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, BC Premier David Eby, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, all coming up on this action-packed episode of Scott Fox After 9. It is brought to you by The Caulking Store, thecaulkingstore.com. I'll talk more about them coming up on this episode. Friends, I don't think I'm going to get to any listener DMs because once again, under the steady watch of the master negotiator, Mark Carney, tariffs are going up again. Or are they? Yesterday, President Trump gave Canada notice, 30 days, that he's going to slap a 50% tariff on certain industries. And it's a really strange, antiquated list. But on certain industries, a 50% tariff. This is partially because we pulled U.S. booze off the shelves in many of Canada's provinces. Only Alberta and Saskatchewan did not do that. The Americans are still angry about dairy. That's one of the reasons they started this. We've got supply management in Canada. The Americans don't like it. They say it creates an unlevel playing field. And a lot of Canadian officials don't want to talk about it because I can tell you a lot of politicians actually agree with the Americans on this. That particular sector, not fair. But nobody wants to open up supply management because in Quebec in particular, that is a sensitive issue. So where are we at? Trump threatened us with 50% tariffs yesterday. I think it's a threat. I think this is classic Trump to try and get the Canadians to pay attention and sit down and negotiate a deal and try and get all of this worked out. I think it's a bluff. Taco, right? Trump always chickens out. He threatens these things, but he never goes through with them. Well, we'll see. He gave himself 30 days. I'm not particularly worried about this because it's par for the course. And to be honest with you, I think the premiers love this. Because right now, the premiers have a chance to all stand up and talk tough again. They're having a meeting of the premiers right now out in PEI. It's crazy that the premiers can sit across the table from each other and drone on and on about America when the one thing they had to do was get rid of the interprovincial trade barriers. And to Mark Carney's credit, he cleared the way for that to happen last year on Canada Day. Well, now it's 2026. And there's still a ton of interprovincial trade barriers. We're holding back billions in our economy because these premiers can't seem to figure it out. Before I get to all of the audio, here is Mark Carney speaking yesterday in Ottawa.
I had a series of conversations with the President of the United States over the weekend on wildfires, made very clear both the scale of the issue, the scale of the forest that Canada is blessed with, 8 times the size of Texas, the fact that we have effectively a drought, conditions that have extend from the equivalent of Texas all the way to Minnesota, to put it in American terms.
Those are just a few of the Prime Minister's remarks yesterday. He did talk to President Trump about the fires. You know, I don't know that the president didn't necessarily understand the scope of the fires. I'm sure that lesson from Mark Carney was probably helpful, but I have a feeling he knew the fires were bad. That's not the American issue. The American issue is that it happens year after year after year. I talked a lot about this yesterday. Frankly, I think that we need to do more to prevent forest fires and more to respond to them quicker. Justin Trudeau, he promised in 2021 he was creating this rapid response force, committed millions and millions of dollars to this. And clearly it's not working because the fires are getting worse and they're happening every summer.
Ambassador, could you just clarify how you think our relationship with Canada stands right now, particularly with the USMCA, with that not being renewed for 16 years? Where would you say the state of things are between the two nations right now?
Well, first of all, one thing to remember is we have always had trade issues with Canada. It's always been the most contentious part of our relationship across decades, whether it's with softwood lumber or, 20, 30 years ago with trade in grains and pork across the borders. So it's not new to have trade tensions with Canada. I would say going forward, I'm going to keep talking to my counterparts in Canada. The Prime Minister put out a letter yesterday responding to the President's action. His letter was, firm but moderate in tone. So they haven't cut off talks. So we're going to keep discussing with them. The reality is we want outcomes that are good for American workers and American businesses, and we're going to pursue those. Sometimes you have to take trade action to incentivize those actions, and sometimes you take an action that leads to a better negotiation in the end. We will see where it leads.
That is U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer speaking earlier this morning on CNBC. He had more to say.
Let me give you just a little bit of history, Joe, on this issue. In April of 2025, as you know, the president embarked on a new trade policy really designed at reshoring manufacturing production to the United States and getting the trade deficit down after exploding for decades. Of all the countries, and we imposed tariffs on all the world at varying levels. Of all the countries who retaliated against the United States, one was the People's Republic of China and the other was Canada. Some of the things they did is they banned the sale of U.S. liquor and other booze on Canadian shelves. They capped and limited the amount of autos that could be shipped to the United States from companies who were reshoring to the U.S. And they also continued to maintain limited space for market access for U.S. dairy. But importantly, they give other countries better deals on each of these three issues. And so it was a natural consequence after a year of these measures being in place, and longer in the case of dairy, for the president to take action. These are responses to this retaliation. We've been asking for a year for the Canadians to remove these, to modify them, to adjust them. They haven't done that. And so we have a tailored action that covers a subset of Canadian goods. We aren't banning the goods like the Canadians have banned American alcohol. We're not putting a cap on them or limiting them like they've done to cars and dairy. But we have a tariff, which is, again, is a natural consequence of the Canadian retaliation, which has endured for a long time.
That's the American perspective. That's the way the White House sees this, right or wrong. That's how they see this. I'm wondering what you think right now. I'd love to know what the audience is thinking. Where are we at in trade negotiations? Because it sounds like the Americans are partially doing this as retaliation over banning American booze and because we've taken no action on supply management. But it also sounds like this is to try and get the Canadians to the table. And if we're not at the table, let me ask, why are we not at the table? Does Mark Carney think it's more politically advantageous to try and go it alone? Maybe create a middle power alliance? Align with China? Does he think that's more valuable to him politically than trying to come to a deal with the Americans? Is he exploiting Canadians' dislike of Donald Trump politically? Doesn't want to make a deal with Trump because if we have a deal with Trump, the Canadians aren't going to like it. Is that what he's doing? It's hard to say. I don't know the strategy at this point. But frankly, I find all of this fascinating and sad at the same time. Every day that goes by, Canadians are getting worse and worse off. And nobody seems to care. Nobody's talking about it on the news. But things are pretty bad for the middle class right now. Meanwhile, these people in Ottawa and Washington are just playing games. Let's get to another one. I want to play for you now. Let me see here. I think I'm going to do... Yeah, let's get to the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Here's him this morning on Fox News. This is him talking a little bit about the current situation.
President is poised to unleash new tariffs, fresh tariffs, on dozens of countries soon as this week, we're told, as the president has imposed a 50% tariffs on some Canadian goods, including cars, alcohol, and dairy products. What is the trade discrimination that is at hand causing the president to hike tariffs here on Canada?
Well, I think it's something that we've discussed with our Canadian colleagues for a long time, and they haven't done anything about it. They're highly discriminatory on dairy products. U.S. alcohol and beverages have been
Yes,
removed from Canadian shelves. So, this is really just reciprocity in terms of what they've done to our great U.S. companies.
A lot of Americans are getting that messaging. I just played you that clip from the Fox Business Channel before you heard one from CNBC. Americans are paying attention to this. Those clips are all over social media. The Americans may sympathize with the Canadians. In fact, I think they used to sympathize with us much more than they do. But I'm telling you, Americans are starting to get the message that Canada is ripping them off, that we've always been unfair on trade with America. That message is starting to resonate. I'm pretty good at reading the room, and if we were counting on the American people to be our biggest ally, I don't know that we've necessarily won them over. The booze ban seems to be a real sticking point for the American people. They feel offended. And I know Canadians feel offended that the whole thing is going on, but they never banned our booze. We banned theirs. And there's a lot of Americans that are starting to suffer because of that. They could be at threat of losing their job if they work in a brewery or a distillery. There's consequences for stuff like this. And the Americans don't like that. Anyway, I'm not choosing sides here. I'm just calling balls and strikes. And frankly, I think the Americans in America are doing a pretty good job at convincing Americans that Canada is screwing them over here. That gives the president more support. I think now we're at a critical juncture where Mark Carney needs to make a decision. We're either going with China or we're going with America. And if we're going with America, he's got to sit down at the table and get a deal done. Mark Carney's own words. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And it doesn't seem like we've come to the table here. Let's go to Prince Edward Island. The premiers are meeting right now. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe. Let's go to him. I like Scott Moe a lot. He's usually a fairly common sense guy. Let's hear what he has to say about U.S. alcohol.
That would be an ask for the federal government to make of those provinces. Not for a subnational government to ask their respective counterparts to do so. So I won't say I don't expect that ask to come. I think it's already been made in some cases. So that'll be a decision each province will have to make. But that ask should come from the federal government. They're at the negotiating table. They'll know the sensitivities that may present in those negotiations. And they'll also know that what counteraction would happen should that occur by the American administration. And I don't know the answer to that yet. We may later today.
Premier, does that comment you just made mean that the federal government has asked some premiers to remove their booze bans? Is that your understanding?
I expect that ask to be coming.
Do you think it has already been made, though? The way you phrase that?
Hasn't been made of Saskatchewan because we're in a different situation, obviously.
I'd like to hear more from Scott Moe about why they chose to not ban American booze. This is not unanimous in Canada. Saskatchewan and Alberta, you can still get U.S. booze, and the Americans appreciate the heck out of that. It's the rest of Canada that's starting to come off a little unreasonable to the American people. Now let's go to British Columbia Premier David Eby, also speaking to the media this morning.
The approach of the U.S. administration has been predictable in a sense that they are continually trying to find creative ways to try to attack Canada's economy. There's no question about that. The Canadian strength is that we have been very clear. Prime Minister has been very clear. He's had my full support in this, that no deal is better than a bad deal with the Americans. We should not, out of a sense of desperation or anxiety or what's going to come next, bow down to this president's attempt to put pressure on Canadians.
David Eby there saying no deal is better than a bad deal. I wonder if he has any thoughts on the Gordie Howe Bridge. We had the best deal. We paid for it. We were going to be getting all the money for it. Donald Trump had a pretty good negotiation move here, and Mark Carney gave him half the revenue for 15 years. I wonder what David Eby thinks of that, but I don't think there was a comment on that. Let me get to a different one from Premier Eby. This is him talking more about the trade relationship with the Americans.
Obviously, the news of the day is the president's recent decision to levy more tariffs on Canada for reasons known only to him. I'll say that this feels like an increasingly desperate and flailing approach to relationships with our country.
Interesting perspective there from BC Premier David Eby. The president is flailing. This is a desperate attempt. I don't know. I mean, to me, the Americans have actually been pretty consistent on this. They don't like that we banned their booze. They are not happy with the current trade relationship. They're trying to reset it. I'm not defending it, but that's been their position. They feel they're being ripped off in places like dairy and with our digital services taxes and things like that. They want stuff like that gone. And to be honest, I think a lot of Canadian people would like to see those things gone too.
There is not a chance in hell that U.S. alcohol is going back on the shelf in British Columbia. And I'm proud of that. And I know the British Columbians support that. And the idea of the president that he can bully us into whatever he wishes is incorrect. We're strong. We are, despite our many debates, united as a country. And we will continue to stand strong. And we will build relationships with those countries at the national level, at the provincial level, that want to have a relationship with us.
Oh boy, not a chance in hell is the booze going back on. One of the other things that I'm a little concerned about in this negotiation is President Trump is all about his image, how he's perceived, how he's portrayed, things like that. There's a couple of Canadian premiers, and I'm thinking specifically about Doug Ford, David Eby, and Wab Kinew from Manitoba. They don't just criticize the situation. They seem to like to criticize the president personally. And the language is becoming increasingly hostile. I don't think that's going to help us in any way. You know, if you go and try and get in Trump's face, he's got exactly the kind of attitude that is don't back down. Maybe we don't need to take such an aggressive posture and make this personal. We've done a pretty good job at saying this isn't about America, it's about one American. Okay, but that one American is the guy who signs the deal. That one American is the decision maker here. I think that maybe we need to watch our tone a little bit. Let's try and be a little bit humble, because at the end of the day, we know. And they know. And they know that we know. We need America. And we need to get a deal done with America. That's the best leverage that America has right now is we need to get a deal done. I think we need it more than them. Not for a second do I think the Americans aren't feeling it from this trade war, but hey, we're dragging it out. It really seems that way. We had a deal last October, and we intentionally blew it up. Let's go to yesterday. CNN, Ontario Premier Doug Ford talking to Wolf Blitzer.
For joining us. It sounds like you're feeling frustrated with this situation right now, specifically after what the president said.
Well, I'm never frustrated with the American people, and I always differentiate between the American people, which I love, and the president. You know, this is beyond politics, our relationship, Wolf. And I know when neighbors need help, you go and support them, just like we did in Hurricane Helena. We sent over 50 utility linemen down there, trucks, I should say, over 100 utility linemen to support the people in the Carolinas and Georgia. We had our water bombers ready out west to support the California fires. Right now, I understand that there's, and I had to triple check this figure, over 40,560 fires since January 1st of this year in the U.S., and burnt 3.9 million acres. And I just find it very frustrating that President Trump wouldn't say, here, we have assets, we'll bring them up there. Because I can reassure the American people, when you have any natural disasters, we will be there within seconds of a phone call. And we love our American neighbors. We're going to be there to support them. But it's unfortunate, the president has to politicize it. And maybe what the president should do is get rid of the tariffs on the softwood lumber, because 33% of all the lumber the U.S. uses comes from Canada. And when you put tariffs on it, there's a reason why housing construction costs are going through the roof in the U.S. and not making it affordable because of these tariffs. I want to work with our great friends and allies, and I emphasize great, because, again, I love the American people. I know they love Canadians, but not one asset, not one offer from the president has come through to the prime minister or myself. We need support. We need help right now.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford. That was the perfect thing to say. I mean, that's exactly what he needs to be saying right now in this situation. I do find it hard to believe that the Americans haven't offered to help. Is that potentially a misunderstanding? Are we supposed to ask, or are they supposed to offer? Have we asked and they said no, or are we just not talking at all? That's what I want to understand here, because there's a difference. If we didn't ask and the Americans didn't offer, okay, well, we didn't ask. If we asked and they said no, then I've got a bit of a problem with it. Somebody pointed out to me in my DMs the other day the irony, the biggest fires that have affected North America in recent memory, since the smoke and things like that really started to become an issue. The three places where the fires were the most prominent: California, Minnesota, Canada. Those are three places that on the political spectrum would be very, very, very left, especially Canada under Justin Trudeau. Friends, this episode is brought to you by The Caulking Store. You can find them at thecaulkingstore.com. And remember, good caulk was hard to find until they showed up. The Caulking Store is in Mississauga, Ontario. They're at the border of Etobicoke, conveniently off Renforth and the 401. They have a low price guarantee, seniors discount, contractor pricing, and fast and reliable delivery if you need it. They're Canadian owned and operated, and the Caulking Store carries all the big brands. You don't want to use the wrong sealant. Repair costs are very expensive, and expensive is expensive. The Caulking Store is going to help you find the right professional grade sealant for less. They carry all the top brands. They've got all the right tools for the job. You want to talk to these guys if you're doing a home reno project in particular, or if you're a contractor too. You don't need to be taking advice from someone who's wearing an apron and reading that label for the first time with you right there. So go to the pros. If you need caulking, thecaulkingstore.com. Big shout out to them, and thanks for bringing us this episode of Scott Fox After 9.
Summer is here, which means we all want to look and feel our best. A GLP-1 may be right for you. Visit orderlymeds.com to learn more about which GLP-1 you could be eligible for. Getting started is fast, easy, and happens virtually through telemedicine from licensed professionals. Check it out for yourself. Go to orderlymeds.com/podcast. That's orderlymeds.com/podcast. Taking care of yourself feels great. Compounded medications are not FDA approved. Eligibility required and determined by a licensed provider. Individual results may vary. See website for details.
And going back to President Trump, because he got me on a roll right now, with all the assets the U.S. has, and he's sitting there complaining, why don't you send up some water bombers? Why don't you start helping us like we would help you in a heartbeat? And we looked on the national data sheet down there, and I had to double check it because I find it astounding that they said over 40,000 fires. That's ridiculous. And I double checked if there was extra zeros in there. But anyways, you should support your neighbors. That's my message to the president. Sorry to go on a little rant, but it drives me crazy.
Yes, clearly he does. We all know about Doug Ford's disdain for Donald Trump. Okay. Again, I'd like to know, did we ask and they said no? Did a formal request go from Canada to the U.S. or from Ontario to a U.S. state? I know that Minnesota was asked and they said, we're tapped out, because Minnesota's dealing with crazy wildfires as well. Criticizing America for the number of fires, I think that's a little misguided. Again, there seems to be a misunderstanding here about what the Americans are asking for. Asking when they asked, I think, was totally inappropriate. They could get up here and help if they're able to help. Thank you, that would be appreciated. The Americans weren't pissed off about the smoke, saying get your damn fire under control and keep the smoke on your side of the border. That's not what it was. Their issue is that it happens every year. Every single year this is coming up. They're saying get these fires out, and by next year, let's say that we did something to prevent these fires or get them put out faster. You got to admit, something is different here. These fires never used to be like this. What's going on? Are these arson? We seriously need to consider that possibility. I have nothing to suggest it other than some of the other fires that we had in previous years were arson. Started intentionally because it was essentially a free global billboard that they could point to and draw attention to climate change. Okay, well, if it was arson, then climate change didn't set that fire, just so you know. It's almost hypocritical to even suggest that. Let's figure this out, please. If the U.S. can help Canada, they should. If Canada can help the U.S., it should. Can we make a trade deal? I hope so. Cooler heads have got to prevail here. Let's work this out.
Premier, switching gears, I wanted to ask about Minister Cho, or former minister. He kind of misled the public when he said that he expensed those hotels because of late night sittings, because he expensed them during months where there were no late night sittings. So is it acceptable to you that a caucus member is lying to the public?
It's unacceptable on spending taxpayers' money. He's no longer a minister, but Stan has paid every single penny back, as everyone will, to the taxpayers, and it's already been paid back.
But what about the fact that he's misleading the public?
Again, it's unacceptable to spend money of the taxpayers where, in my opinion, shouldn't have been spent.
Hi, Premier. Colin DeMello from Global News. I'm here to ask as well about Stan Cho, but less about taxpayers, more about the riding association and donors to the PC party. Over the last 3 years, as MPP for Willowdale, Stan Cho has billed $100,000 for meals. That includes dinners at steakhouses, lobster restaurants, and a lot of joints in Yorkville. He's charged airline tickets outside of the riding, hotel stays at the Fairmont Chateau Laurier, and even the cost of renting a vehicle from a limousine company. Question you, Premier, what is the expectation for a donor to the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party? Are they to expect that their money will be spent fueling the lavish lifestyle of an MPP?
Whoa! Oh, that is Colin DeMello from Global News. Can you imagine if we had a media that asked questions like that of the Liberals? They'll never go after the Liberals the way they go after Doug Ford and the Ontario Conservatives. And I'm not even saying Colin's wrong, but wow, when you frame a question like that, that's bananas. Doug Ford here is involved in a scandal. And the scandal, at first I felt bad for him. Turns out some of his members of provincial parliament were misspending taxpayer money, allegedly. There are no shortage of places where you can find the info on how much money some of these people who live very close to Queen's Park were billing for hotel nights. Now, one of them, Stan Cho, Ontario's former tourism minister. Was it tourism, culture? Whatever. I don't know. Anyway, he's gone. He stepped down from cabinet. That's a pretty substantial pay cut he takes when he leaves cabinet and just goes to being a backbench MP, essentially. But anyway, now it's come out that he was billing his riding association for all kinds of meals and other expenses. So he's billing through the legislature for hotel rooms. Then he's billing his riding association. That's money that got fundraised by the Ontario PCs, donors that donated $10, $20, $100, whatever. And this guy's out having steak and lobster in Yorkville with it. It's nuts. So anyway, that's what the question of Doug Ford is right now. After I play this clip, then I'll tell you why I did feel bad for Doug Ford at one point. Listen to this.
No, again, it's totally unacceptable what Stan has done. He's paid back every single penny. And moving forward, the Board of Internal Economy, they're getting rid of that offer of staying in the city in hotels. But again, he's paid back every single penny, like every single other person will be doing.
Okay, you're obviously speaking about the hotel charges charged to taxpayers.
Anything.
I'm talking about the donors. I don't think he's repaid about $100,000 plus of money taken from the Willowdale Riding Association. Sorry, you were going to say?
No, go ahead.
Is he going to remain a member of your caucus? Is this acceptable within your caucus to bill donors hundreds of thousands of dollars for meals, flights, and hotel rooms?
Everything is unacceptable if you don't put it to the right place. So it's totally unacceptable.
So the Riding Association is the right place then?
No, again, Colin, it's unacceptable. And he's no longer a minister in our government.
Richard Southern, 680 News Radio. As you say, Minister Cho did resign over the $16,000 in hotel expenses, but many other of your caucus members, Premier, spent even more. Nina Tangri, $19,000, and above them all, Hardeep Gurwal, $29,000 in hotel expenses, despite the fact that he's within commuting distance. My question, Premier, if you said Stan Cho did the right thing in resigning, should Mr. Gerwal resign as parliamentary assistant, and what consequences should he face, sir?
Well, they're all paying it back, and it's unacceptable. If you guys think for a second I'm happy about this, you're wrong. It's unacceptable. They're all paying it back. Simple as that.
There may be Ontarians, I'm sure, Premier, that will look at the $120,000 in hotel expenses and not see a huge difference between that and the almost $200,000 you charge taxpayers for costs related to your private jet, which you quickly sold. My question is, if you're directing your caucus members to pay back the hotel money, will you pay back the money for your private jet?
Well, again, I love your questions. Can I tell you something? When I traveled out to Utah, when I traveled to South Carolina, guess where I ate? I ate at McDonald's. I pay out of my own pocket. I've never, ever charged the taxpayers. I'm the only premier in the history of this province that has a zero expense account. I'm going to repeat that, a zero expense account. So I don't expect people to have a zero expense account, even in the opposition, when they used to fly all over the world, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars going over to Asia and so on and so forth. I find it pretty ironic and hypocritical from the opposition politicizing it. I have zero time for anyone that doesn't respect the taxpayers' money, and we're going to continue doing it. But maybe what you should do is look into my expenses and find out that I have zero expenses. The only premier in the history of this province. And yes, I'm the only premier in the history of the province that didn't fly around in government planes. I flew commercial. And yes, I have to charter some too. So I respect the taxpayers. Simple as that.
Okay, so Premier Ford, he didn't ask for this one. Premier Ford has done a lot of things that got him in sticky situations, but this one, I don't think that he is very happy about this. I think when he found out about it, he was probably livid. A number of his MPPs and even a cabinet minister and a parliamentary secretary bill in 5 figures for hotel rooms when they're not entitled to hotel rooms because they live there. It's insanity. So Doug Ford did the right thing by making them pay it back. I felt bad for Doug Ford because this was not a scandal of his doing. It had nothing to do with policy. This is a culture thing, and generally speaking, I don't think Doug Ford promotes that kind of a culture. But how he's responded to this, Stan Cho has stepped down and Doug Ford accepted his resignation. Good. But what about the other ones? Is all that money getting repaid? And how far does this go? The opposition in Ontario says this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't know at what point Doug Ford is going to decide to cut bait. I'm sure he doesn't want to do it. But if he really means what he just said, then I think he's got an obligation to make sure heads roll here. And if someone should step down and doesn't want to step down, I think the leaderly thing to do would be to fire them if you're a head of government. And that's exactly what Doug Ford's job is here. Friends, there's going to be a lot coming from the premiers today as they get together. I'm also told that there is a virtual meeting today with the Prime Minister. He was supposed to go and meet with them tomorrow. Instead, he's doing a call today, and it might still be that he sees them tomorrow, but for whatever reason, he needs to speak to the premiers today. Well, if we've got a Prime Minister addressing the Council of the Federation urgently, why is Parliament not sitting? Mark Carney should absolutely recall Parliament until we figure out a strategy going forward in a unified Canada, how we're going to deal with the Americans. And if Parliament decides, you know what? We're not going to bother with the Americans anymore. Screw them. Sign us up with China. Okay. But I think that the parliamentarians elected in their ridings deserve to have a say. I think that the House and the Prime Minister, the government, should hear what parliamentarians have to say. There should be an emergency debate. Parliament should be recalled. That is my suggestion for the Prime Minister now. Friends, have yourselves a great one and buckle up. What a week this is going to be. I'll have another new episode for you in less than 24 hours.